Hello, everybody. Lovely to see you. Hope everybody's surviving this very tedious time. I noticed some familiar names, but names I don't know, so it's excellent. This is the free Q&A. I'm Katherine Fauvre. And what you want to do is put your questions in the chat, and then Erin, who works with me, will feed me the questions, and then I'll answer them. It would be really nice. Is the show of hands working, Erin? Were people? But nodding heads are fine too, since I can't see all of you at once. Hi, Andy. It's been a long time. Hi, Sarah.
I don't know what
Hi,
happened
Liz.
to hands. Oh, they're there.
Hi, Richard. Hi, Ron. Great.
Hi.
Great. Hi, Ayla.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi, Dario. Just met you once, but yeah, hello to everybody, but I'm just seeing the names now. Let me quickly go to the other 4 pages so people don't feel left out. Hi, Jan. See quick names. If I miss you, hi, Rachel. Hi, Jonathan. Hi, Ben.
Hi.
Ben and Jonathan are the 2 men from the UK that I do so many of my free events. So they're on here. Gosh, I see so many names. Hi, Alex. I'm sorry if I miss you guys. I really am, because I know you in so many different ways, and it's really wonderful. I've had great experiences. Hi, Samuel. Hi. Gosh, hi, Cindy. Hi, Steph. Wow, so many. Hi, Patricia. Who am I missing? Debbie Hayes. Yeah, oh, wow. This is wonderful. This is especially fun because a lot of people are also teachers of the Enneagram. A lot of you may be that I don't know that are teaching it, or you might just be an Enneagram enthusiast. And that's amazingly wonderful, because I was that for 10 years before I did my research projects. I did everything, went to whatever I could to understand the Enneagram. So I'm open to any questions. I know you come from different schools of thought, or you've cross-trained, or you just passionate about the Enneagram and have read a bunch of books, or you've talked online. So with your question, just mention your background, because that in a snap will help me answer your question in a way that will make it easier for you, simply because I've certified with all the schools that were available in 1995 to certify, and I've taken courses or attended workshops at the IEA conference with everybody that has, I wasn't there last year because I was sick, but all the prior years. And I also have done an intensive with Naranjo and an intensive with Ichazo. So some of the things I might be able to explain in a better way, like if you say you've studied with one particular person and your question my answer might seem a little confusing, so it helps me to know what I can say and when I knew what. Because some of you have studied with me, and I've learned so much more since I've seen you, and you may not know that. So
are you just now?
I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
I think it might have been someone that just wasn't.
Oh, can everyone mute until you have a question? Yes, it'll make it easier for everybody listening. Like, for example, Andy, I think I met you probably in 2004, right?
Andy Rowe or Andy who?
Andy Rowe.
Actually, it was about 2 years ago, you did an Enneagram for me.
Oh, okay. Great.
So,
I don't know why I was thinking 2004. But yes. So 2 years ago, I've even gone back in the last year and compared my study findings with Ichazo and Naranjo and did a course just recently. 3 courses of 3 types, and talked about what proved to be consistent with what they said and what didn't work. And it really, really improved the understanding of the Enneagram and why people can mistype and don't know it. But they do know that they're not as interested in the Enneagram if the interventions don't work. So I put a lot of attention in the last 2 years to going back to basics in terms of the original creator and disseminator of the Enneagram. And it explains a lot of mistyping, words that were left out, key aspects. I've done a couple hangouts with Ben and Jonathan explaining a lot of those transmissions that were incomplete or misunderstood. And you might notice if you're on my Pinterest site that I'm moving people that I'm used to, like I just moved Oprah from type 3 to type 2, and she was always tough for me. But when I went back to Ichazo and Naranjo's definition of 2 and 3, she's actually the social 2, which often looks like a 3. So you may just see names moving around because I try to keep it contemporary. And a whole piece of type 2 was put into type 7. So many people have mistyped as a 7 because the descriptions of 7 were really the descriptions of type 2. There are differences. And I know that myself, having been in the community for 35 years, if I have an identity around my type and tritype, it's kind of hard to then tell people, actually, I'm not type 2 in the tritype, I'm type 4. And that was a tough one. I didn't want to be a 4, but clearly 4 is in my tritype. But does that make sense? Just with a show of heads, I really don't worry if you describe the types differently. There's no right or wrong. I'm just coming from cross training and finding out who did what and when, and why each teacher teaches a little differently. Okay, so let's begin with the questions.
Okay, so here's the first question. Someone emailed this question. It says, I read your insights into type 2 with one-wing people, and especially their inability to hold on to friends or relationships. What do they lack? What is their blind spot that needs to be addressed? I haven't seen this discussion anywhere.
Oh, I think it was probably a discussion of misunderstandings around the type 2s that were not, I would have more specifically identified by the instinct, but if a 2 is struggling, the reason for the struggle is there's this deep need to know people like you because there's a fear of being alone and no one will care for you, and in particular provide for you. Now this is going back to the very original training. So if you have a fear you won't be provided for, you're going to try and do something to be worthy of getting care, but you can't be the person that is saying or showing that you need care because you're coming from a defense strategy of this bountiful abundance, which is actually a false abundance because underneath that is a deep fear of being totally alone. And it's different than the 6's fear of being alone. But it's very profound. And where do they get in trouble with people? It's when they're feeling that loss, or they haven't won someone over that's really key, then the pain is so great that the defense strategy is saying, advise them, say something, give something. And it could be very, very simple. Like I was at a doctor's appointment many years ago, but there was someone who walked out of the doctor's office, but was at the counter to book her next appointment or pay or what have you. And I was in the waiting area with another gentleman that was reading his newspaper like this, so he could not be seen. I imagine he was a 5. But she walked out and she had the, so I knew she was stressed because I've studied microexpressions, faciology, many, many systems on body language, and I've correlated that to the Enneagram. So hypothetically, I knew she might be a 2. I'm not going to say absolutely, but she looked like a 2. She sounded like a 2. She was discussing things like a 2. And she kept looking over at the waiting room. And I knew that whatever she was upset about then was something that was stressful enough that she needed to give something to just get back to a sense of normal. So she said to me, "Oh, I love your sweater." And I just said, "Oh, thank you." And then she said, "Oh, and I love your boots too." And I go, "Oh, thank you." And then she started to ask me more questions, but then she went to the gentleman and she said, "Oh, I like your khaki pants." And he just didn't answer. And then she tried again. And she tried several times to engage the gentleman sitting next to me. And that's where the anxiety comes up, because if you need to be a welcoming, good person, it's very stressful if you're not getting feedback, positive feedback. Now, Ichazo called the type 2 ego flat, and that was for ego flattery. In other words, the ego could only survive if it flattered others so they would like you. And if they liked you, they might be willing to provide for you. And that's just like having that backup. Now, we all want backup, but how do we go about getting it? So if the 2 is feeling a lot of stress, they may not know that it turns on the apparatus of, I got to find something to give, anything. And they go to flattery, compliments, because that seems to make people smile. And then they get the mirroring they desperately need. And when I was doing my research, I was thinking it was the 6's that had the greatest fear of being alone, or the self-pres people. And I was surprised how much this was true for the 2 at a fundamental level. But I had to do the in-depth inquiry process to get under what you think the defense is as a 2, down to what's really underneath it. And it's this giving was not a word that Naranjo and Ichazo used, except they did say giving advice or doing something, which was later translated into giving. And the only problem with that, and it's on all my material too, is that lots of types can give. But are you giving little things all the time, even if it's just making people happy or trying to boost the mood? Because we've associated that with 7. And the 7 is more the type that doesn't like the down mood and tries to inspire and move the energy into a positive mood. Whereas the 2 feels like this obligation to cheer people up. So sometimes on the Enneastyle questionnaire, they would say cheerful, whereas twos, would say cheerful, and the sevens would say upbeat. And they are different if you think about it. Now, if someone has 2 and 7 in their tritype, they're going to do both. But is there a 2 that will comment on what I said? Like, Rachel, are you willing to say anything about how that's true for you?
I think it's very funny that we've started with this conversation, only because when I've seen your email today about the new test, and I saw that it said that we would be prompted to do the same inquiry that I've been using for my clients now with many years. So I knew what was coming. And I'm like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to now, knowing everything I know, try and honestly say, 5 adjectives to describe myself. And immediately my brain still just wants to say independent first, the first most thing that I want to say about myself, even knowing everything I know. It's because I even though I understand the whole backstory, that it's because I need to be a person who does not need anything from anybody else.
Right.
And has so much that I can always give something away.
Right. Perfect.
So yeah, very
and
much.
Independence is at the core of 2, and that's the false belief. And if you must be that bountiful giver, you can't need anything. And if you look at the dichotomy, and what the 2 is trying to achieve is freedom. And that's the independence the 2 really wants, is the freedom to just do what they want, rather than having to limit their will to what they feel they have to do to feel connected and safe with others. So I'm glad you said that, actually. And it is hard. And with my questionnaire that began in 1995, it began before that, but I did this study on it in 1995, is that you need to look at what was true for you most of your life, most of the time, not who you could be, should be, want to be, or have become. And 6s will often just do, well, in the last 6 months, I've mastered this. So they put current information. Now, why do they do that? Because their type is meant to do that. Because it depends on the situation. And so current is critical for the type 6. Yeah, any other 2 want to say something about what I mentioned? No, I won't. Erin, if there's someone on another page, I won't see them. I'm afraid to freeze again.
If they start talking, they should pop up on your front.
Oh, yes. So just unmute yourself if you want to say something about that. And then start speaking, and then I will have it. No? Oh, Alex, are you saying yes? No, you got a high five up there. All right.
Hi, can you hear me? My name is Shelley. I wanted to talk about my 2 self.
Sure. Thank you, Shelley.
Sure. So I'm a 2. I've been in the Enneagram studying for, I guess, about 2.5 years now. I studied with Ginger Lapid-Bogda. That's my training method. And
Ginger goes back to the Helen Palmer, that line. Yeah. I mean, she's taken much more information since then, but her key line was Helen Palmer. So, okay, right. That helps me.
Yeah, okay,
the way
great.
She teaches the types.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, in relating to the other woman talking about independence, I definitely have what you said about that really struck a chord with me, because the freedom for me is super important. Especially, it's interesting during this time of COVID, I am doing what I want to do every day. I have free time. I haven't, because I was, my contract where I was working, I was ended in January. So, and I haven't been working since, but now every day I'm doing what I would like to do every day with my life. And it's so empowering. But I'm also, finding, the desire for validation of, even though I'm not working, I'm still working hard. I'm a writer and doing other things. So, so I'm working hard about detaching from that need of validation. So that's like a practice that I use in my meditation every day, is trying to release the attachments that I have for that validation.
Yes, it's really hard because of all 9 types. When I was compiling what I learned from people, and they sent in their pictures, words, and phrases, and I was making the collages, the 2 was the last one for me because it just didn't seem as consistent as the other types. And then once I checked it out with the 2s, they say, of course not, because I need to alter and be like the person that's in front of me. But they really responded to a picture that one of the 2s sent, which is in the upper left corner of the collage, and you can find it on my website, where there's a panda bear that is kind of facing water, and you can see the reflection of the panda bear in the water. And when I interviewed that person, they explained that I need to see myself in your eyes. So if you're not responding to me or you're not looking at me, it feels very unsettling. And even when I've worked on it, I find that I'll ruminate about it or think about it and try to do something to impress the person so they give me that contact, that connection. Now, yes. The word connection is difficult because all of us want connection, but what type of connection do we want? But the 2s want to see you looking at them. The whole heart center does. But that's pretty key. So you brought up a really good point, Shelley. And it's the mirroring. And what type is the best at mirroring others? Type 2. So our very strength is, in a way, a compensation for our deep, deep suffering of feeling unseen for who we really are. And that's just human nature. It's an existential dilemma for all of us. Okay. If there's anything else, let me know, or I'll move on to another question.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you holding this session very much.
Oh, yes. I mean, I love sharing things that will help people better understand their type. Actually, more than ever. Always have, but Zoom has created all kinds of possibilities to do that. Okay. I guess we can move to the next question then, Erin.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to your test. The first question about the test is, how did I come out as a 6 when I didn't choose any 6 cards?
Yes. I have programmed in all the patterns of what 6s do in testing situations. So if someone had a different lead type in their first 9 cards, and a different lead type in their second 9 cards, and a different lead type when they were compared, and then a different lead type in their tri-type, and a different lead type in their word choices. So if there were enough differences, it's automatically programmed to suggest the person is type 6. Now, after years of working with people that struggle getting their type accurately, it's the type 6. As I said, it's not because they're not smart. It's that they are looking at, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that. And nines can struggle too, but they will say, I can do that sometimes. I can do that sometimes. I can do that sometimes. And so they'll test differently. Now, how does that happen? As they're taking any test, both 6 and 9, will first answer it the way they believe they feel and choose a card or a statement, whatever it is. And then the next time they see the card, they could say to themselves, well, I chose that card last time, but you know, this card's true too. So they're not intending to do it. And the test is set up in a way, if you chose like a card twice, and then you go to another card that's not even related to the first choices, it'll signal that that special pattern. And there are about 10 patterns that 6s use. And it took me many years to figure out exactly what it was. And then I wanted to program this for 25 years, but it was considered too difficult to program. But I have a programmer now that's just so amazing. And he programmed it so that it's happening. And thank you so much for those that have taken this beta test. And I'm going to offer it free for a period of time so you can send it to friends and family. And there's a whole lot I can teach you about the tabs at the end of the test. I'm not just giving people their test results. I'm leaving in if you had a tri-type that was 451, but your type was 7, and then there's no 7 in the tri-type. That's usually a 6. I'm leaving that with the asterisk, if those of you who've taken it noticed. And then it says, this indicates the possibility of type 6. And where that happened, or if it's like 6 and 9, like a pattern, because actually 3, 6, and 9 are trying to balance. They're the center of each center. So in particular, the 6 is looking at yin yang. So if we were to look at a yin yang symbol, would we say it's all black or all white? Well, it's equal proportions. And that's what our 6 is looking for, balance. So's the 3, so's the 9. But the reason the 3 is better at identifying their type is a lot of the key words for type 3, they just know they have to do. But a social 6 will say, oh, yeah, I want completion, especially in Myers-Briggs if they're an SJ, for those of you that know Myers-Briggs. They usually think they are a 3 or a 1. So I know the patterns of what people think they are, which is why I ask for their Myers-Briggs type. But I can tell from the words. There's a category on the test in the results page once you click the link that I send you. And you'll never have to join a group thing to get your results. You'll be able to forward your link to anybody you want. And, you know, save it forever. You can download it to your computer, copy and save it to your computer to do whatever you want with it. Because I think it's really important for people to be able to see what they chose at one time and another time, or go back and look at what their friends did once they know how to work with the results of the page. So I put a lot of money into the results page so that if you're a coach, if you're a therapist, if you're a teacher that has students, if you do typing interviews, even if it's just with friends and family, or if you're a spiritual guidance counselor, you want to understand why the person ended up with the answers they did. So everything's in there. And you can always go back and look at the Enneastyle word choices. And if you have my Enneastyle book, you can just look at the choices of the words and look up the 9 types and see which one they match. And the lexicon use. That's all in my updated Enneastyle book. You have to get it at KatherineFauvre.com. The one I had at Enneagram Explorations, I've long since updated. I've put in some key pages in there. But does that make sense? I mean, the test, I could actually do another event for those that are really interested and show you what you know and how you can understand it. I gave a category called Enneaspreads. It's more than Enneaspreads, but it shows your top answers for each testing situation. And then people can see for themselves that they chose different types every time they were asked, or at least 2 or 3 different types. In other words, no continuity. Even when they were given the playoff, it still was different, and we had to keep giving them more playoffs and more playoffs. But I arranged it so there weren't as many as my original test with Enneagram Explorations, and the testing instrument is structured the way I wanted, which never happened with True Self. So I'm finding it much, much more helpful with people understanding the more accurate type. And if people are new to the Enneagram and they don't have any identity around a type, they have no problem with considering type 6. But I can tell you, nobody wants to be a 6. No one. And I will constantly improve those cards. Okay, any comments on that from anybody before I move on? How many of you have taken the link that went out yesterday? Oh, great. Great. Did you come out the type you believed yourself to be? Nope. Karen, you want to say anything about that? Was it, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
I am not a professional. My career has been in pastoring and in teaching children, but I've had some workshop experience, and I thought I was an 8, and I came out as a 3. And my tri-type was 368. So I'm still fairly new to tri-type concepts.
And what was your instinct?
I printed it off. Intimate, social, self-preserving. My color ran out, so it's kind of faint.
Yeah, many years ago when I did that first research, and also in 1995, I was crazy in 95. I did 3 certification programs, and 4 months later did the intensive with Ichazo and wrote 3 studies. I was like crazy, but I was just on a run, and I just loved the information. But now, the 368 is the most assertive type on the Enneagram. I call it the justice fighter. And whether you're a 3, 6, or an 8, you think you're an 8, because the way you view world is the description of 8 that's out there. Okay. And what's not out in a lot of the earlier descriptions, and in all fairness, by the way, none of us had all the information, like even when the first books came out. So I used to teach exactly like that until actually Naranjo's training in 96. And then I went and had all the people that had attended my classes or done coaching sessions with me come together, and then I corrected them and gave them the refinements that I learned. And I changed from that day forward. But a lot of people, of course, didn't get that information, so they don't know. But 3 and 8 are very similar, and they're very strong. And a lot of people think it's the 3, 7, 8 that's the most aggressive type, and that's what we believed. And the 2 most aggressive types, or assertive types, are 368 and 378. Okay. Actually 358 as well. It's that whole, the head type doesn't matter as much, but you get 3 and 8 together, and you have assertion, results oriented, moving towards what you want. The three. So the question I would ask you, there's two questions. I would ask you how goal oriented you are, and I would ask you to list the 5 words you gave to describe yourself.
I didn't write them down.
Oh, you got them. It's in your test results.
Okay, I guess I don't have that.
I gave everybody that so you could look back and say, oh, is that what I said? And it really helps. But
Where I didn't see it. So
you had to click on the show answers.
Oh.
So that's one of the tabs. So it shows exactly what you chose when.
Okay. I'm pretty goal oriented. And part of that I related to my teaching, trying to achieve a goal with a child. But even just kind of in personal stuff.
How about in elementary school? Were you goal oriented and just got your work done? No one needed to say, do your homework?
No, I was not. I was a procrastinator. But it was also very easy for me, so I could do it very quickly and take the test with no problem.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you could procrastinate.
Yeah.
But why were you procrastinating? What was the reason you were procrastinating?
I really think it was a kind of a fear of not doing well enough.
And what was the crazy idea if you didn't do well enough?
I would be a failure.
And if you were a failure?
No one would love me.
And if no one loved you?
Then I would be alone.
And if you were alone?
It would be scary.
Yeah. Thank you so much, because you're describing it more like a 6, actually.
Okay.
I mean, I'd want to know your words and I'd want to know a lot more, but that's how the 6 answers. So you have to go beyond the word failure.
Okay.
And you have to see for the person what's underneath the failure. And then we get to that existential fear. And that's just, in my case, I've tens of thousands of people doing the in-depth inquiry process. But we have to do it really on all the words, all the things that matter. And then you see a pattern. And we usually stop too soon. No one wants to feel
right.
No one. So I would invite you to look at type 6, but not from the way it's been written in the past, but looking at the core fear of type 6, which is being alone.
Okay.
And on the description of types, did it give you a type 6 at all? As one of your, did it give you that answer?
Yeah, it was first 3, and then I had access to the 6.
Yeah, if you have 6 in your tritype, you have to check it out. It may be the lead disguised as another type in your tritype.
Okay.
And that's only because a lot of the information on 6, like the 2, was incomplete.
Okay.
Sometimes, a lot of times actually, the emotional 6 will type as a 4. And it's completely understandable because the 6 is the most emotional type on the Enneagram, not the 4. The 4 is just identified with their moods. We all have moods, but it's the 6 going from mood to mood to mood to mood because it's what they're thinking. Has anyone ever said to you that they know exactly what you're thinking because you look surprised, or you look like you're concentrating or doubting, or you move your face from side to side, like you're doing now, actually?
Yeah. No, I think when I'm in public, I have a pretty good public persona that I put on and present myself as confident and yeah.
And would you say that without that facade, and we all have one, that you feel confident? Yeah, that's more type 6, because 3 states, yeah. we think we're confident. In fact, we miss a lot of things because we're too confident, especially the eights. So
Yeah.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Karen. Yeah, just look at that and notice your words and go read under Tritypes on my website. There's a little paragraph for each Tritype. Now, it's not a full explanation, but you should relate to all three types in your Tritype and what happens when the three come together, what it creates.
Yeah.
Because if you have 3, 6, and 8, that amplifies behavior that's strong and assertive. If it was 2, 6, 9, that amplifies being soft and giving. So each combination either amplifies or cancels out certain qualities to a degree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, if no one else on anything, we can go to the next question.
I had a question kind of about the test.
Great.
I scored very differently than like when I've done the Tritype test in the past. I got, when I did the Tritype test, I knew I was an 8 going into it and was just curious about Tritype, and it typed me as an 854. And let's see. So then when I took this test, I was just kind of curious to see if it was different or how it worked. And it typed me as, well, it typed me as a 1. And then
What was your Tritype? What did it type you as? Was your Tritype?
As a 258, and then suggested that I should be a 6. And I've been overthinking the questions, or I don't know if the cards were different than last time.
They're served differently. When I designed the cards and then shared them with True Self, temporarily, they shouldn't still be using them. But anyhow, when I shared them with True Self, I had designed the cards to look at the more dominant answer, but the programmer and the other 2 people I was working with decided on their own to give a different point system, and it just ruined the results. But see, they didn't create the test, so they didn't know what I was going for, and that it would never work to give the point system if I didn't determine the point system. About 15 years ago, David and I created a program where you could just take your Enneastyle results and dump it into this program, and it would give you your potential instinctual stacking and your Tritype stacking. I got to talk to David about still making that available. We used it personally, but I sat down and took a couple thousand answers where people took the test that we had at the time and the words they used, and then I could find how to rank point-wise on a 5-point system a certain word. Like, for example, the only type that has used the word naive is type 6. And I look at all these tests every day. I look at tests as they come through. I have it on my computer, tests. Now it's filled with tests. And so I look at it, but I sat down and deliberately did it and worked out the point system. So if you don't know that word naive is a particular trigger, that immediately suggests type 6, because other defense strategies couldn't tolerate thinking they were naive or gullible. Another word for type 4, for example, is the word crude or gross, or what's an even better word? Well, let's just go with crude or unrefined. And that would be under the question, I avoid, and then you fill in the rest. And often the 4s would say people that are crude or unrefined or make bad jokes. And they didn't know, of course, that that's a hallmark answer for a type 4, especially if they said I am tasteful anywhere on their questionnaire. And it may be hard to believe, but only type 4 has used the word tasteful in that questionnaire. In fact, I shared my results with Naranjo, and he told me, and that was in '96, he told me that he'd never really created the full description of each instinct. So he asked me if I would put my paragraph of his teaching into my study book, my Instinctual Subtypes book. And I said, well, wait, you want me to publish something you've never published? And he said, yeah, it may take me a while. And he said that he'd never really taught the instincts completely till that intensive in 1996. But he just not noticed this or noticed that, just working with so many people in a SAT group, Seekers After Truth. But he'd never consolidated it until 1996. And so he wanted that information to go out. And there's an article I wrote on that training with Naranjo, if you want to learn more about it. And it's in my blog part, but what's it called? Reflections on Type. And it was published by Enneagram Monthly. And Jack Labanuskas and Andrea Isaacs asked Naranjo if he would look at my subtype work, because people really wanted to know more about it at that time in the 90s. And there was very little written on it. And the belief was that it was secondary to your type, but actually is primary. It's more fundamental. And that came out in my studies and in the interviews. I like to do, I do a small part in my research that you can numerically calculate. But most of my research is qualitative, not quantitative. And that means I go in with a hypothesis, basically, that there's something important to learn about the types that I don't already know. And then when people fill in answers, it comes through it was like, how do I make sure I'm not calculating results that are inaccurate, that people have mistyped? So in all my studies, I would say, what type are you? And then I would ask how certain you are of your type. And then I would put a little comment box in everything. And David would say, that's crazy. There's no way to calculate that. I go, well, I can print off the answers. And if I see that pattern, I can go look at it. Well, sure enough, in the comment boxes, the 6s would say that they were certain that they were a 1 or a 3 or an 8, whatever they identified with. And in the comments, they would say, this person said I was this type, this expert said I was this type, and then point out all the people that they polled or asked what their type was. And what type does that? The 6, that's their job. We need someone in any group or family or community that's going to check and double check and look for inconsistencies. But was that really certain? Because they would often say, well, I guess I'm not really certain, even though they checked the certain box. And they'd put in that comment. And there's the beauty of 6, balancing things. They hate things that are yes or no. They want sometimes or could be. Because yes or no, all of a sudden is not balanced anymore. 9s don't like it either. So does that make sense? Is there any 6 that's willing to talk about this need for balance and pointing out the opposite of what hasn't been stated? Anyone that thought they were another type and then discovered they were 6? No?
Yeah, definitely. That talking about that need for balance and feeling a need to point out the other side in a discussion is definitely something I've done.
And did you ever poll people, Samuel, as to what type they thought you might be?
I've never polled other people. Yeah, I've never really done that.
Do you ask other people's opinion on things?
Yeah, a lot of times if I don't feel like I know what to do in a situation, I would rather hear somebody else's opinion, and I may or may not go along with it 100%.
Thank you.
But
yeah.
But I at least want to know what they said, and to know that whatever I come up with is not, that I'm not going out on a limb.
Well stated. A lot of sixes have will go and ask, when they feel doubt, will ask someone else their opinion. But what they're really looking for is someone that has the same opinion they do. Because it doesn't mean they're going to take the advice of that person, but they're curious to know. And that's the gift of type 6, actually. Whereas as an 8, I never asked anybody anything. I was filled with opinions of my own. I didn't need anyone else's opinions. And it's one of the most important things that I learned to do as part of my growing edge, is to ask other people. Now, if they stated their opinion, that was fine. I didn't tell people they were wrong, but I didn't ask them. But 6s naturally do when doubt comes up.
And Katherine?
Yes.
I'll say, this is Cyril Vetter speaking. Yes. Nice to see you again, talking from Boulder. As a lifelong 6, 60 years worth of being a 6, this aspect of asking others' opinion but not really wanting to know it, I love the way you phrase that. I haven't thought about it like that. I think it also clarifies a lot why authority is such a problem for me, because I'm always looking for the authoritative answer, but then I'm always disappointed in what they have to say. And so I keep looking further, but then I have a really hard time with authority because I always think they're not as smart nor as good, but I won't speak up and be assertive about it. I believe I'm a 269 as a tritype.
Okay, so the softer version, yeah.
Oh, so soft. I wish I had this
more to themselves. Whereas if you had this 8 and 3, out it might come.
Yeah, boy, I wish I had some of that 8 and 3 in me. I'll tell you that. So I think it really helps explain why they say we have problems with authority, the way you've just clarified that we want the answer.
You want a trustworthy authority. And if there's something that the authority does that in some way raises that suspicion or doubt, then it's very disconcerting and you rebel against it. But then if the authority comes back at you, then usually your tritype in particular, the 6 will backpedal, because you pushy surrenders the dichotomy for 6. So you'll push for what you believe in, but then if you're met with resistance or aggression, whoa, that's too much. You need balance again. So whereas the 8, by comparison, or the 3, no, we just stay with our opinions. We don't backpedal.
Yeah.
We maybe, like the 6 has the common sense to back off. The 8 does not. It's, again, the growing edge for 8 is to not so much give up or give in as to allow. Whereas the 6 needs to be willing to hold on to your view. Now, the whole heart center is initiating information or relationship. And the whole head center is then resisting. So the 6 is the center of the head center, but 5, 6, and 7 all have an ambivalent relationship to authority. And then the 8, 9, and 1 is the reconciling force, kind of the, we may think, for example, of the 8 as the most masculine type, but actually the head types are more masculine in their thinking because they're calculating, they're adding up pros and cons to everything. But the 8 is the most visceral type that asserts. So that's why they seem like the most masculine, but their thinking is not that masculine. Gut types get into muddled thinking. In other words, we have a visceral reaction, then we try to explain why we did it. Whereas the head types go to doubt, they have a fraction of a second where they want to make certain, and then they respond. Now, a real counterphobic 6, that's a 3-6-8 tritype, they tend to blurt like an 8 because it's so fast. But if you're looking at the difference, just for those of you in this group, if you just see a fraction of a second of hesitation in someone's eyes, you've got a 6 rather than an 8 because they had to do it. Whereas the 8 is, we've already said it, done it, because it's visceral. And the heart types try to couch things in a nice way. Now, having said that, the 3 actually is really strong in their opinions, but oh, they need admiration and affirmation, so they try to curb that in themselves. Thank you, Cyril, so much, because our 6s are so misunderstood because the information out there is really incomplete. And I haven't written all of it either. I hate to write. I don't type. I hunt and peck. I can talk about it, but I can teach it, but writing it down in materials. And what I've done for other people, not me. It's been an act of love to do it for the benefits of this system. Thank you.
Hey, Katherine?
Yeah.
Hey, it's Ron Chi, as you know me.
Hey, Ron Chi.
How are you? Good to see you.
I'm
good. I
good.
was just going to throw in one thing on the 6. Yeah, obviously that pattern of never coming to certainty, always wanting the other side, always saying, but what if? Obviously very central. And of course, I have the tritype that puts that on turbocharged, which is the 694, if people are wondering. Yep. But the big lesson I learned.
Tripled out, so decision making is very hard.
Right. And thankfully later in life, I'm happy to report, is better with that, but it is the pattern. But the thing I wanted to throw out is that's been my key learning, is how to distinguish between the unhealthy and healthy versions of that quality. Because you can also throw out the baby with the bathwater. I found.
Oh yeah, you don't want to do that.
When I initially started, and I found that there is that gift, and if I can do it in the healthy way, it can be really valuable. And if it makes any sense, I've kind of learned to be certain and grounded about my uncertainty, so that I'm able to be the one who can bring the gift of, let's make sure we're checking out everything. And it's tricky because, I've studied adult development, and without going into the weeds, an attribute of higher developed people are to have more openness and a little less certainty in a certain way. It's different than the 6 thing, but there's a little mimicking thing.
Yeah.
So it can be weird. So I almost have to find the way to do that healthy, more complex thinking without doing the just watery openness to everything, if that makes sense.
It's wonderful what you're saying, because when I work in organizations, of course, they know nothing about the Enneagram when I first go in, but they learn about the Enneagram, but they have problems. So I did a lot of conflict management, like 15 years with the federal, what's it called? Reserve Bank of San Francisco. And I also went down to LA. But the key thing that would happen, especially with a 7-6 dynamic or a 2-6 dynamic, is both 2 and 7, and I could add in 9, they want positive rapport. They want easy relationships. They don't want conflict. How they go about doing that is different. But if they had a problem with a 6, it was usually because the 6 would point out what could go wrong. And I had to teach the positive types that that's what the 6 is meant to bring to every organization, every group, every team. And I had to teach the 6s timing on when you say what could go wrong. Waiting till the end of a discussion and say, have we considered this, this, or this? And it's amazing how well it works. But it's hard for the 6 because the 6 wants that balance immediately, because the 6 doesn't know who's considered what. People don't just say, I thought about this that could go wrong, I thought about that could go wrong. So that's why they naturally ask it and why we need it. And it's such an important quality that I admire in 6s. Many of you know I work with Erin, and she's a 6, and she's always telling me things I should think about. And so it's great. It's just great for me, because a lot of them would never cross my mind, because I have no access to 6. Anything more you want to say, Ron, or should we go on?
No, just throwing that in.
I'm so glad you did.
It's a tricky thing, I find.
Well, I think what you're pointing to is that all the types are lovely and wonderful when they're not in dogma. And all the types are difficult, and we could stereotype them when they're under a lot of stress and that fundamental need is not being met for them. Then there's an over-assertion of whatever we're good at. We're just saying it so much or overdoing it, regardless of our Enneagram type.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the timing issue, because I find sometimes there can be a not openness to the questioning, and if it's our gift. So the timing is a great thing to know about, to not be constantly there's a time you can come in and be the one to let's integrate all this, not right away but what about this, too quickly.
I should mention at this time that both 6 and 8 have to work on that, because 8s are so blunt and they say things so immediately that they're not waiting for things to unfold. But the 8 is responding to the absence of a structure, of a leader. And then unconsciously, the 8 goes in when there's a power vacuum. And then the 8 is in trouble for what they're saying. But both 6 and 8 are looking at what is the worst case scenario for the 6. And the 8 goes beyond the worst case scenario and goes to the potentials that are beyond. In other words, if the 6 is pointing out, gee, someone could rob our storehouse of food that we've all stored, and the 8's gone beyond that to, we need to go see who could be a threat beyond our borders. And people would say, what? It's too far forward. And in the case of the head types, they're all future oriented, but just in a different way. And so you're pointing out what could go wrong, and the 8's just taking it to the point where you got to track everything to make sure you're not weak, or there's if you think of a castle wall, the 6 might notice some cracks and say, do you think that could be a problem in a war, if they have cannons or what have you. And the 8 is saying, let's walk the perimeter, because there are weak spots in the actual castle, but we need to see how close the trees are to the castle, where people could hide before we could see them. They're going mega. So in a way, 6 and 8s are serving a purpose to do that. And then the 7's giving us the positive possible outcomes, and the 2s are making sure everyone feels good about what they've said and what needs to be voiced in just a very different way. So thank you. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Runchi. Okay, I want to make sure you have time to break out. Let's see. So, oh, we're good. We're good. Okay, another question?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi.
Where are you?
Pardon?
Oh, Cindy?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm kind of new to your group, but I've been studying the Enneagram for ages. I started in the early 90s, I think. Area, Helen Palmer. I went to the first Stanford conference, and I ended up writing my thesis on the Enneagram for my master's degree. And I've continued on and on. But I, as you've been talking about 6, it reminded me that I first typed myself through my early studies as a 6. And I was studying with Helen Palmer. I was a counterphobic 6. So I wrote the Enneagram from the perspective of my 6. And then later, to my horror, I retyped myself as a 4, which was the one I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be a 4.
And what instinct of 4?
Self-pres.
Okay, good point. That's the only time it happens, is with the self-pres 4.
And then I took your, the one in 2014, I took that one and got my Tritype.
Was that the Enneagram exploration? What color are the cards of the border of the cards?
Oh, I don't remember because I just got the printout that's black and white.
But what does it say at the top?
It says, congratulations.
I think it's Enneagram exploration. The first Any cards test that I did.
It was Enneagram cards.
Yeah, okay. It was.
So it said that potential Tritype 469, potential wing 3, but my Enneagram type overall, Enneagram card overall was 4, and the ranked Enneagram card in your spread was 4. So I got 4, 4, and then Tritype 469. And self-pres, which I do identify with self-pres. But I was just confused as you were talking about 6, and I was like, gosh, I do that all over the map. And a lot of people recently have been telling me, oh, you're so intellectual. You're so in your head all the time. You know, why don't you move to your heart? And I'm like, but I am in my heart. I'm a 4. I'm emotional all the time. You don't understand. And so I'm getting a little worried talking to you, like maybe did I?
Oh, and understandably so, because this is only from my research and going back to the original definition of the types. But what 5 words did you use to describe yourself? That would be on that test too, but it would be at the very bottom.
Right, I have it. It says a lot of 6. I am warm. I am insightful. I'm a thinker. I'm calm. I'm a seeker.
And how often are you calm?
Well, that depends on if you say from the inside or what people notice. They notice I'm really calm.
Well, you notice how you said it depends.
Yeah.
Just notice in the future how often you're asked a question and you say it depends.
A lot.
That's 6. That's a hallmark of type 6. You probably have 6 and 4 in your Tritype, and you said 649, right? Is what you came out.
I said 4, 6, 9, and everything else was 4. Yeah.
So the 469 Tritype is very 4-ish. I should say that. And in that first test, I couldn't get someone to program in those hallmarks that would indicate another type. So if you take the current test and you remember what you were like, or use the same words that you used in 2014, but ideally go back to your 20s. And if they're different, put both in. Like I was this way in my 20s and this way, you know, in my 40s.
You can take the test twice? Or do
No. You've already taken my early test.
This one?
Yeah, the 2004 test.
Yeah.
2003, I guess.
14. I took it in 2000.
I created it it went online in 2003. David put it up in 2003. But I changed a lot since then. I have a lot of key things in the programming that are indicative of 4, and there are more assessments. There aren't just 2 and then your answer. So like people say, oh God, why? That's why I call it a comprehensive test. But if you really want to know your type or your identity, like the Enneagram spread, and there is a, in that first test I had the Enneagram spread. I'll never forget the programmer asking, well, do you want to know what the top choices were for people? That I can just leave that out, right? And I said, no, I want to know. And it turned out that whatever your Enneagram spread is, it's your identity of yourself. Not necessarily your defense strategy, but it is your identity.
Right.
And he also asked me, shall I just exclude all the words that were and, a, but, to, T-O-O, or T-O? And I said, no, I want to see how it works out by type. So I was curious about everything. And for example, the word to, T-O-O, wow, type 2 used it. Because whatever they were to something. Like they might even say negative things about themselves in the questionnaire, not in the cards. The cards had to be positive. But in the questionnaire, they would say like that they were too tired, too overweight, too helpful, too
Too emotional?
Too emotional, absolutely.
That was 4.
Yeah, but 2 say too emotional as well.
Oh, okay.
But what I'm talking about now is the word T-O-O.
Right.
Because I never used that word filling out a questionnaire. And I didn't realize it was going to be important. And there's certain things like certain words, only a certain type or certain quality. And again, that's the type of research I like to do, is finding out what I don't know and seeing who agrees with that, what's their background. And then when I find 3 people that do something that I did not know, I interviewed and then got their answers and then went back and interviewed people that I was certain of their type. And that's the information you're getting from me, plus what I was later taught. I did that first study. I was teaching tri-type and calling it 3 types or tri-center for a long time before I ever taught it. And that developed totally independent of Ichazo's trifix. But when I heard about trifix and the classes were being taught, and I think 15 years ago, they started doing workshops on trifix. And I was saying, wow, I'd heard the term in 1996 because there was an interview of Oscar Ichazo in the Enneagram Monthly again. They were very, very helpful in moving information forward and sharing information and getting different opinions from different people. But nothing was written, it's just a paragraph. And I go, wait a minute, I need to know more about this. It was not published, it was not taught, other than Ichazo saying you have a fixation in 3 centers. And that's why it was called trifix. So when I first noticed that pattern of 3, where it wasn't a line of connection, it wasn't a wing type, and all these interviews I was doing, how could people relate and their answers be so close to 3 types that have no relationship to one another, but one from each center? Now, if it was a wing type, that was a different story. Then it was a question of which type they might be. So I just assumed that I'd found what Ichazo found and called it trifix and gave him attribution. And then they contacted me and they said, thank you so much for the attribution. They actually attended a class incognito to see what I was going to say. And then afterwards, the person that was there incognito, the attorney for Eureka, said, wow, you're teaching something that I've never been taught, but is an expansion of what I learned from Ichazo. And she said, because you're so much in the public eye on the internet, because let's face it, the internet gives a lot of exposure, and Eureka did not have things on the internet till recently. He said, would you mind if he kept the word, if Ichazo, could he keep the word trifix? And we'd all been talking about it and wondered if you'd be willing to call it tritype, because you use all three types completely and you do comparisons and you have all the computer work. And I said, certainly. So that's when I changed from trifix to tritype, because at that time, which I think was about 2007 or 2008, maybe, some of you might remember because I taught at the conferences. I then changed it to tritype, and it was meaningful because Eureka said, we haven't published anything, so everything out there is from you. And I said, well, I kind of noticed that, but I just assumed that you had a lot of material that was just, unpublished. And no, that wasn't being shared at that time. So I thought, okay, good, that makes sense. So people won't be confused. And that's how tritype emerged, actually. And it was actually the people from Eureka, the Ichazo people, said, you really need to get that term. Not only should you make it tritype if you like that type, but you should get it registered, because you don't want people calling things tritype when they're not. And I said, well, I don't really need anything registered. And they said, trust me, if you really want people to understand that material, register it. Call it a trademark so that people are giving attribution as to where it's coming from so they can get back to you. Because that was a problem he had, is that like the books that came out, most did not give attribution to him at all. So anyhow, I did. And here we are today. And it's woven into the test.
Right. So I understand the basics of the tritypes as you've presented them. And something you just said now kind of added to my understanding, if I haven't already heard it before, is that you have your identity with which you identify with, which for me comes out as the 4. But then you have this tritype, meaning you move from your, what was it you said, your coping mechanism?
Your defense strategy.
Oh, your defense strategy. If the 4 strategy doesn't, tell me if this is correct. If the 4 strategy doesn't work, then I move to 6, assuming 4 is correct. Then I move to 6 strategy. And if that doesn't work, I move to 9 strategy. So I'd like to see an example of that in the 4-6-9, or, whatever you want to choose, but mine is 4-6-9. So I can contemplate if I ever do that. Yeah.
Well, let me share something important. Like when I first kind of confirmed the existence of tritype, 3 types as I called it, I could see an order with people I was working with, but they were nanoseconds apart, and it oscillated back again. So really what happens to all of us is your tritype, so yours would be that 4-6-9. It's going 4-6-9, 4-6-9, 4-6-9, 4-6-9. So how do you really know? And so then I learned it's what happens when those 3 types merge. And then that's why you get a more specific view of life. It's a more specific explanation of your defense strategy. But having said that, let me just say that when all three types in our tritype agree on a decision, have the same opinion about what you should do with a problem, we make decisions like that, all of us, even 4, 6, 9. But if two types feel one way and there's one that is opposing and is giving you information, no, don't do that, danger, 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 Will Robinson, not that, but the other two say, yeah, that, it's a struggle, and it's usually when it's hard for us to make a decision. And once we get all three in alignment and our instincts in alignment and get to the neutral of each, we can really make good decisions because we're not using an imbalanced overuse of one of the instincts or one of the types in the tritype. But that doesn't mean we don't still have a lead, because with everything in life, there is a lead. There's something that's more dominant.
So the lead would be the one you identify with?
Not necessarily.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the 6 can secretly be the lead, but the 6 is identified with every type other than 6.
Like the 9.
If they're emotional, they think they're 4s. If they're really reactive, they think they're 8s. If they're perfectionistic, they think they're 9s. If they're achievement oriented, they think they're 3s. If they're really shy and introverted and like math and science, they think they're 5s. If they're, who did I forget? If they're upbeat and they're social 6 with a 7 wing, they think they're a 7. And if they just want harmony, they're usually social 6. So there are real patterns out there above and beyond what can be written in a book, unless the book was like this, well, this big maybe, but in the discussion. So there's 2 ways to look at tritype, and that is the order you use them, and that's conical, and then the archetype. And you have to look at both. Both are influencing your decisions. Just like the tritype stacking is what it is, versus like I came up with the word stacking for the instincts because at the time in 1995, you had one instinct. And what I found immediately is that people identified sometimes with 2 so close, it was hard for them to know which was the lead. And there are all these different patterns. So in my trainings, I talk about the different patterns: 2 close, 1 really low, the stair step where they're kind of equal moving, and 1 really dominant. They usually get their type right up front. But when you have 2 close, it's really subtle. And if the questionnaire does not use the right words for you, it's tough. And what I'd say about 4 versus other types is you have to look at the role you need to play to be safe, and how, and that's all hard types, but in particular for the 4, what mask have you put on of eliteness and the special, like 2s really like the word special as well. So, and so do 3s in a different way. And how is it in some way so exclusive or unique that someone needs to come in and care for you, give you what's missing?
I identify with that.
Yeah. Whereas the 6 is kind of embarrassed that they have doubts or they're worrying, and people say, yeah, you need to go to therapy. You're just always talking about what can go wrong. Or I think 6s are so happy when they finally do discover they're 6s, because everything they're doing makes so much sense. Just adding to the 6 part, not the 4. I would have a lot of 4s that would come to me and just say, I just have so much anxiety and nothing's working, and what do I need to do? And then I, of course, review things and do the inquiry process and say, these issues are fear. They're not the image you need to have to be safe, the role you need to play. It's that the existential fear that you want to avoid. And once they reordered their tritype, if it was appropriate, they relaxed because it was a secret. There was a superimposed image covering up fear because it's embarrassing. From the time we're little kids, we are criticized for being afraid. So yeah, just throwing that out for the sixes.
And yeah, I'm still struggling a little bit with that 6-4
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. I mean, you'd want to look at more of the words on your questionnaire and see if they were true for you when you were a child and when you were a teenager and when you were 20 years old, and not just in 2014. And if you put any different words, consider it. But the self-pres is afraid. So the self-pres 4 is the one exception that can mistype as the 6. So I'm not saying you're not a 4. I'm just saying that usually they're 6s. But I do know the exceptions, and they've been programmed into.
That self-pres is the exception.
Yeah, it can, but I'll still suggest the possibility of 6, especially if it's in your tritype.
Yeah, 4, 6, 9. So when I take it again, I'll take the new one you just did. Are you suggesting I don't put the words from 2014, but try and put the words from childhood?
All the way through. That's still true to this day.
Anything that's true from childhood to this day.
Yep.
Oh, look for everything that's still true.
Yeah. So what's interesting is a lot of types change at puberty. And what'll happen to the 6 is they might be cautious and really double checking and fearful. And then they go through puberty and then they're pushing back. So they're confused. So they have to look at the way they were at 3, 4, 5 when they first went into some type of schooling situation. And then what happened after puberty, and they felt confident. So it can't be the beginning of puberty because none of us are confident. We're like uncertain with how we're coming across. But we change so dramatically in puberty, we can even some ways seem like a different person, but at the core, we're still the same person. We've just developed additional attributes based on the hormonal changes of puberty.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Next question.
Okay. So we have had several questions about instincts, and we've had a couple people asking, can one instinct be healthy when another one is unhealthy? And then, like, how would you know that self-preservation isn't just a survival skill versus an instinct? What would the difference be?
Oh, they're both really important questions. The most common instinct is self-preservation. And if you think about the species surviving, you would need that first and foremost. Then social, then sexual. That's why I order everything self-pres, social, sexual. Or other people do self-pres, sexual, social. They're looking at a different developmental chart. Both are could be applied, but on a fundamental level, it works much more consistently in terms of the instincts if you look at the core fear of the instinct. So the first part of that question is say it again, the first part. Oh, let me finish the second part and then I'll go back to the first. But if there was a dangerous situation, we all become self-pres first. It's the defense of the defenses. If there was an earthquake or a tornado or anything dangerous, we immediately do what we need to survive. And then just a few seconds after that, if you happen to be social, you're looking for the other people's survival. And if you're positively identified social, and if you're the sexual, you're looking for your intimates, not that you might not help people along the way. And I remember a lot of interviews after the 2004 tsunami. There were people that said they were just tormented by other people that were suffering when they were suffering, but they had to survive. So they couldn't reach out to someone. And other people might end up in the title expression of the tsunami because they were arm in arm with other people trying to rescue, excuse me, that makes me emotional, people going by, because I remember the video. So you caught me there. But, and then it would be really sad, but the person was doing what they wanted to do. And that is help others. And the social instinct will rise up. And once they're, I'm okay. Oh, who else needs it? It's just automatic. And we all do all of them, but what is that immediate response? So now a lot of people with this staying, I call it lockdown, but what is it? Shelter in place, is that correct? Yeah, shelter in place. For me, it's like, no, lockdown. I'm locked down, I'm limited. I can't freely do what I want to do. And I certainly don't want other people doing it because I don't want to become ill. So I see the merit to doing it that way. Like I see the merit to, you drive on the right side of the freeway, but I don't like it. I push against it. And on an unconscious level, even though my mind knows it's perfectly logical and a good thing to do. So go back, Erin, to the first part of that question again.
Okay, so the first part was, can one instinct be healthy and another unhealthy?
No, but it can seem that way. And let me explain something really important about that. Is the dominant instinct is the one that is the CEO of your instinctual stacking. And it feels a lot of stress because it's trying to govern the other two instincts to handle what the problem is. And in my original research, I found that the third instinct was so unknown to the personality that I called it the blind spot. And then that was perpetuated and went out everywhere. But when I did a lot more research, I discovered that that third instinct is just eclipsed. It's immature. And once you identify it, it matures so fast because you've recognized it. You're conscious of it. But that middle instinct, I said, we're kind of comfortable with that. Well, the problem I found is we were too comfortable. So after someone knew their dominant instinct and then their third instinct, they had to work on the arrogance of that second instinct. So for example, my second instinct is self-pres. I thought, yeah, I got that handle. That'll always work out. No problem. But that's not what I really think on a visceral level. But it's what I've told myself. And it's the denial of the 8. So remember, we're going to have our defense strategy, whatever it is, projection, denial. Just trying to think of some of the other ones. Yeah, they're not coming to me at the moment. We're going to do that with our instincts. That's how the instinct and the instinctual stacking and the tritype merge. Boy, and if you have both of those correct, it creates exactly what's going to trigger you. So it can seem like one instinct is healthier than the other, but it's usually you're less aware of it, or you're you're arrogant about one of them, and it's usually the middle one. Because if we're hurting and suffering, our whole system is behaving in a automatic, gotta fix it energy, which is not best for our health. But I define healthy and unhealthy very differently than a lot of people. There are many behaviors that are actually healthy that it can appear unhealthy. It's the communication of them that can make them seem unhealthy. It's the preoccupation, if you can't do anything else because it's plaguing you, then I'd call it unhealthy. I don't know. Who does the person who asked the question want to say any more about it? No?
Yes, I will. I was trying to, my name's Lynette, and I was trying to, let me put myself on a video if I can. So I asked the question because I do believe, at least right now, over the last year and a half, and my partner and I, we've been together 6 or 7 years, and we've moved a couple of times in that. So that means that socially, I don't have as many connections or deeper connections. So that has become the one that I see clearly because there's a kind of a pattern that I don't really care for, that, you know, and I see myself as a 4, even though I'm not sure about that. So I'll get into this pattern, will just be wonderful. It'll be so exciting and so, wow, this is perfect. And then all of a sudden something will happen and it will go down. And I'm like, what am I doing in this relationship? Oh my gosh, this is terrible. And I'm not getting enough here and that. Now,
well, hold on. Give me your tritype stacking and your instinctual stacking.
So the tritype's based on the test that you did, I don't know, a number of years ago, which is 4, 7, and 9.
Oh, very good. This makes a huge difference.
What?
Well, it's so huge because the 4, 7, 9 tritype feels they must be positive and excited. And you cannot show people. You notice what's missing, but you cajole yourself into not identifying with it, or more importantly, you hide it from others because you learned very quickly that people liked your positive, insightful, deep perspective on things, and they did not like it when you were negative. That's that tritype. So that, now what's your instinctual stacking?
Well, I think it is. I'm not sure. I think it's just because I decided this in the recent couple years. So I think it's sexual, social, and self-pres, although self-pres seems to be the one that I feel like, oh yeah, I've got that taken care of. It's fine. I don't have too many issues with it, although I can see that I could worry about it at times. And
do you think you're
I want to just add one thing, is that before I would, you know, in between relationships, when I wasn't with David, there was a few years I wasn't, and I noticed the social instinct was really like, oh, do people like me? How am I doing? So I just wanted to add that.
You may be referencing a body of work that I did on what the types do in intimacy. And when a sexual type does not have a mate, they become more social. Then they choose from the social things they're doing a mate. And then once they have that mate identified, they become a couple within the social things they're doing, or they just stop doing as many social things because there's more focus on you and me. It's you and me against the world. Now, if you're the sexual 4, you would have a lot of verve, a lot of whoops. In other words, very compassionate, sensitive, and introspective. And then something happens where there's a breach in the connection and being really upset, like saying something that, oh God, I wish I didn't say that. but it seems so true in the moment. And if you're a 4, there is this shy, kind of held back, withdrawn quality that people, you know, they want to help you. You're so sweet, you're sensitive. And then you go to the edgy part and you react, and they're like, whoa.
Who's that?
And yeah, exactly. And as an 8, for example, because we don't have different people identifying their types, but as an 8, I'd say when people get mad, they're telling the real truth. But I came to learn with the Enneagram that that's not true. For example, when the 4 and 6 get angry, they say things they don't really mean. 2s can do it as well, where they get, when they say, you're this, that, or whatever, or you didn't do this, that. And then when they're back in composure, they think, oh my God, I didn't really mean that. I meant that at this level, and I stated it at this level. So the 4, 7, 9 that's sexual struggles with that dilemma. And they often don't stand up for people because they want to be that person that's admired for being so fun and interesting.
That's right, yeah.
It's there's all these interesting combinations that unless you look at both stackings, you won't, it'll be like, wait, that doesn't quite make sense because that's not written about other types. And that's why Ichazo added trifix and why Naranjo added subtypes, trying to explain the differences within the same type. And I just put it all together and also use the Myers-Briggs because the process style is also important. That can throw us off.
Yeah.
And there are other ways people can mistype because their Myers-Briggs is so different from their defense strategy. So I'm not saying that isn't your stacking. But with the dominant instinct, it's plaguing us. It's lurking, like a lurking variable. I remember learning that in math. And I go, hey, that exists in life, lurking variables, and I don't like them. Being emotionally hijacked. So if you're a type that's assertive, being emotionally hijacked is what? Wait, I'm not emotional. Because the defense strategy said, yeah, don't be emotional. So for the 8, it's you'll have no power and influence. For the 3, you won't be considered a sexual person. A socially successful person. And so each type is a little different as to what happens, but it'll go back to our core issue. So for the 8, it's if I don't have the power, I can be treated in a way that's unjust and without mercy. And that I could be at the mercy of injustice, which is like, whoa, intolerable to an 8. But it's all issues of power. Whereas other types, like 4, is traumatized by feeling that they're fundamentally inadequate. That not only are they flawed, but they don't even have the capacity to do the thing they feel they need to be able to do to be ideal. And it's a type that's seeking ideal. The 1, 4, and 7 are all trying to be the ideal. So that's why 4s are tortured when they have things that they feel they lack. And they forget, it's a fundamental sense of lack. Whereas the 4 forgets that they also have qualities and attributes that other people don't have. And in the moment of stress, that's all gone. And what the 4 is noticing is, I can't do math. I'm not a math genius. I'm really good with people and reading things and what's, at the core of things, but I'm not good at social networking or what have you. Whatever it is for the 4. So, yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Lynette.
Yeah, thank you.
Catherine, I had the other part of that question in terms of the survival instinct. In my situation, I have survival is a huge factor when it comes to being on the autism spectrum. So that's why I'm.
What spectrum did you say? The
autism.
Okay, and where are you on that spectrum, would you say?
So I'm at the Asperger's end. I've always had the high IQ aspect of it, which is why when I was in school, you know, I didn't have friends, had no clue how to do that because I wasn't, I mean, I was too smart, and that concept wasn't, you know, that version of autism wasn't really available back then. Exactly. So I was just weird in terms of people didn't quite know how to, you know, potentially bring me in because, you know, I was just too weird and it didn't make any sense.
Oh, you're bringing something so important, Julie, and that is, wait, first, how did you identify your stacking?
In the instincts, it's self-preservation is tops, and then social, and then sexual. Because fitting in, I mean, I didn't even figure out that I was on the spectrum until I was 40. Because I hadn't met any other people that weren't somehow, you know, that were high functioning to the degree that I was, and a woman that, you know, like me. So even though I work with students with autism as a therapist, they all had very special needs that I didn't. So I'm like, well, I might be kind of like that. So as a kid, I always knew that I didn't fit in, even with the brainiacs, but didn't know why. But it was, I mean, that had been always the problem, is I don't know, I don't fit in, but I don't know why. And then once I made that discovery at 40, I'm like, oh, now I know where I fit in. But does that color your personality to the point where it's actually, you know, covering up what your true personality is, or is that who you are?
No, absolutely. It's a factor that needs to be considered. Just like if someone has ADHD, it doesn't make them a 7. They can be scattered and want excitement and be bored, but still be a 6 or a 3 or an 8. So Asperger's influences that ability to just read signals.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah, no. In fact, people with Asperger's say that, you know, I didn't get the book on knowing how to inject myself into a conversation that's interesting. I don't get the timing. I say the wrong things. Yes. People kind of look at me like I'm weird.
Yeah. There's actually a book at that same conference where I finally met Leon Holiday Willie is essentially my model of this is me. And she was the last speaker for that conference. And as soon as she started talking, I had the experience, I'm sure everybody's watched the Santa Claus is Coming to Town. The experience of the Winter Warlock and how his shell melted away, that was my experience. Absolutely. Because now this was me, and it was very clear that this is what was affecting everything. But one of the workshops at that conference reviewed a book called The Hidden Curriculum. And I was taking notes going, well, we didn't get, when was this supposed to get taught? Yeah. So all the stuff I had no idea was going on in the social aspect of things. I was absolutely clueless. And it's, you know, I'm gradually learning what mistakes I make all the time. But as a kid, of course, I had no idea that this book was there for everybody to figure out.
Yeah, artifice, the social artifice is not valued. Facts and information,
yes,
and reality is what you're tracking.
Right. Which is why I'm a really good 5.
Yeah, there you go. And then if you are 5, but having said that, there are some people that think they're a 5 because they have Asperger's. So they need to look beyond and see what they just confirm they're a 5. But if you're a 5 with Asperger's,
yeah,
and it's really like you didn't get the book or the so smart. Why didn't I learn how to do this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for mentioning that, because anything someone struggles with, if they have bipolar, if they have wounding that makes them struggle with borderline or anxiety, all 9 types have the potential to have any of these problems, but they do seem to cluster around certain types. But yeah, never stop listening to other people, because you just happen to be the 5 and Asperger's, so it makes it harder for you. But that's where you have to come up with strategies, or, you know, depending on how you feel, how much you want to reveal, which 5s don't like to reveal. Yeah, I have the gift of seeing all these facts, but I don't always have the gift of communicating them in a way that people enjoy. And most people will soften immediately and go, oh yeah, you're weird, but yet you really know a lot of things and you're really interesting.
Yeah, that fascinating is the word that comes up.
Yeah, I have quite a few people that I've worked with Asperger's, so I've seen it with all 9 types. They all thought they were 5, but those that weren't 5s, it really helped them to see how it shaped their misunderstanding of their type. But when they were a 5 with Asperger's, it explained why they would also be like prickly if something didn't make sense. That kind of the anxiety, the porcupine, like shooting arrows out energetically, because you think you've got it nailed down, you know the answer, and then you don't know, or someone's telling you you're not right, and you know so much more than the other person, and it just creates an energetic push away. That's core energetics, which is
my husband calls my version of that extrapolation to disaster. Because what you know to be true all comes into question.
That's right. And what tri-type did you identify with?
I'm a 594.
Oh wow, then that even makes it more so. So that tri-type is going to make you doubt what the rules are, even if you've learned them.
Oh yeah.
It makes timing really tough of when you need to let someone finish talking and when you need to express what you know to be true when they're blatantly wrong. I mean, that's a tough one for anybody.
Yeah.
But
also, I want to I'm very thankful that I came across Enneagram and Myers-Briggs and all of these various types, because that is sort of my special interest, in the sense that it helps me make sense of people. Because if I can plug them into any of many options, then they're at least predictable.
Absolutely. I started having to take management training classes when I was 20. It was at the time when they could not ask how old you were, and you did not have to say the years you were in college or give any key markers. And I was being interviewed for a job, and they were trying to ask me, and they did ask me my age, and my dad as an 8 said, oh, you just say age is merely a statistical nomenclature, not a measurement of experience, ability, maturity. And then they just didn't know what I was saying. I said, if you want to ask me if I can handle the job, yeah, I can. And this is why. And so I was hired, but they thought I was 10 years older than I was, because talking like that and so confident and giving examples of why I could handle it. And then they wanted to promote me to a manager very quickly. They said, but you get everything done, you do it fast, but you come on too strong. So we want to promote you. You need to take management training classes, because people have to want to follow you. And you're a little blunt and abrupt. And a lot of doing business is about the relationship you create. And I go, what was this, a compliment or criticism? And they said, both. And so I started taking classes then. And once I found Myers-Briggs, wow, did that change a lot. But the first class that just said, some people won't say what they're thinking, and other people do, and this is why. Whereas most of us think when we're young that other people just aren't a good version. They haven't learned what we've learned. And that's because they're not the same type. But Myers-Briggs dramatically influences things too, because it's your process out. What is your Myers-Briggs?
All right. I'm an INTP.
Yeah, that is a common one for type 5. Okay, so that just
I'm consistent.
That makes you more creative.
Yeah.
And seeing things randomly and then finding.
Usually
you can do inductive and deductive reasoning, whereas most 5s, especially with S, they want to just do deductive or just inductive. But if you have an N and a P, you're doing them at the same time.
Yeah. Problem solving is lots of fun.
Yes. There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. By show of hands, I can continue for another half hour asking questions, but I want to also break you into groups to discuss your instincts. Actually, it's a very good icebreaker with other people as to how you experience your instincts, but I want to be able to break you into your type and instinct wherever possible, or just break you into your types, but put you in small groups. How many people are physically here now, Erin?
There's 70 people.
70 that are still physically here, because all right.
Yeah, 70.
Okay, so if I were to break them into 4 people, how many groups do we have versus 3 people?
Actually, I think you'll have to do the breakout groups on
your.
I don't have the panel.
First, give me a show of hands. And Erin, you look at the other ones that I can't see. How many people want me to just keep going with the Q&A and not do a breakout? Okay. Whoops. Sorry, this came in. Do that. Hold on. Now do it again. Okay, on the page I'm on, it's 50-50. And how many people want to do the breakout and then I do more Q&A after the breakout? Darn, I can't see. I can't see. It's pretty even. Okay, here's the advantages of doing the breakout. Is after the breakout, it will trigger how you're alike or different from the people in your breakout, which creates a different conversation at the other part, because I'll ask people, did they discover something meaningful? And the people that want to share, I will talk and answer what they've said. So there's still going to be Q&A, but I could if I make the group smaller.
Katherine, most people in the chat are saying keep going.
Oh, okay. All right then.
Everybody's like, keep going, keep going.
Okay, never mind. I'll do the, yeah, I really, this could be 6 hours or 8 hours. All right, next question then.
Okay, so this question actually was from Samuel. I'm not trying to call you out, Samuel, so you don't have to comment on it if you don't want to. But he was asking about if you're reading your tri-type description, you know your tri-type, that fits, you know your instinct, that fits, but then the combination together doesn't seem to fit.
Yeah, I wish that I'd written all these things instead of just knowing them. So just for if you want to, Samuel, tell people your instinctual stacking and your tri-type.
Sure. So my tri-type is 641. My instinctual stacking, sexual, then social, then self-pres. Now, but the thing is, for me, the sexual instinct does not really seem to go along with any of the types in the tri-type. And I would say for the 6, I'm most social, probably self-pres for the 4 and self-pres for the 1.
You hit on something so important. I projected, imagine that in a perfect universe that you would have just that. You would have all 3 instincts and a different instinct attached to each type in your tri-type. It was elegant. It was meaningful. Wonderful patterns emerged. But with the research, the instinct was so dominant that you have to look at the stacking a little differently. But what you've hit upon that's key is that we tend to be more one instinct in that. So if we do it the way you stacked it, it actually would be sexual 6, social 4, and self-pres 1, which is what you experienced, right?
I would say for me, self-pres goes with both the 4 and the 1.
But now choose one, if you had to choose.
If I were to have a different instinct for each type?
No, because you've hit on something important, and that is the 1 is very anxious, self-pres 1. Mm-hmm. Social 1 and sexual 1 are not anxious in the same way. But the 1 and 6, self-pres 6 and self-pres 1 are the 2 most anxious types. And then your tritype is very hard on yourself. The 1-4-6 tritype, no matter what order you have it in, brutally hard on yourself and critical and trying to improve regardless of which type leads. But I would look at type 4 more. And what instinct of 4 do you think is dominant?
The type 4, I would say probably the self-pres 4 from what you've said about it.
Okay, now that means your 1 would be social.
Yeah, that works, sure.
Okay, so because you lead with 6, it would be sexual 6, the self-pres 4, and the social 1. So you would have, putting that together, the need for strength and beauty of the sexual 6, the need to endure and self-contain, hold back yourself, which is the 4, self-pres 4, and you would need others, yourself and others, to continue to improve. That it wouldn't be enough you'd speak out to others if you were an extrovert, which you're not. But in your case as an introvert, you probably think it and you don't always say it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not critical in terms of the way I talk about other people. I tend to see the positive side in other people, even if I disagree with them. If there's nothing I can do to change a situation, I'll choose to think that people are doing what they think is right, unless I see an opportunity to step in and change something. But no, I'm not critical toward other people.
And how about when you were a little kid? And by critical, I mean you would feel threatened in some way. Oh, that person's too confident, or they're too something.
Yeah, when I was a kid, it was very important I wanted to make sure that I was in line with what my parents thought was correct. And I myself may have agreed or disagreed on some things, and I may have expressed the fact that I agreed or disagreed. I was not outwardly submissive in nature, but it was nevertheless very important to feel as if I was in compliance, whether or not I was acting like it.
How good were you at hiding doing things that weren't in compliance?
I never did. I never did anything really sneaky. I was not the type that woke up scheming ways to get around the rules. I didn't do that.
Most people don't. It's in the moment when
right.
They're denied something and they want to get around it. Share your Myers-Briggs type for people too, because it'll take the shape of that.
I am not really sure about the Myers-Briggs type. When I took the test, I came out INTJ.
Okay. And if you are the INTJ, it would explain another dimension of all of this. It would explain your identification with one and the introversion of the INTJ, but your focus on being good or not being caught or thinking positively about people is not usually one. One immediately thinks what people aren't doing that they should be doing. Then they might go to, yeah, they probably think they're doing what's right. And that's something we learn with maturity. And it also depends on what our parents did. So I can't take out the imprinting of the parenting. Like, I had a 4 mother and an 8 father, and their parenting was, like, be an individual, forget about complying. And then I had a Tritype that was non-conforming. I tried to be cooperative, but I was seen by managers, especially if they happen to have the 1-3-6 Tritype, as not following the rules. And I go, I'm putting myself in a pretzel. What do you mean? I don't want to do that way. I'm doing it for you. And I'm doing this and this and this and this and this. But compared to what they would do, it wasn't as much. So it's also who we're up against, what our parents were, the messages they give us, and they teach us the values of their type, their Tritype, and their instinctual stacking. So if you happen to have a parent that was a strong social instinct, then you're taught you need to engage with others, you need to, and if they were parent happened to be an ENFP, social ENFP, they're saying, oh, it'd be fun, it'd be interesting, it doesn't matter, just talk to people. An extroverted, I should say, really extroverted ENTP, and you don't have to be serious, you can if you want, you can be diverse. That's the message from that parent. And then whatever their Enneagram type is. So we're all a product of that. So the most important thing that you did, Samuel, is you gave a lot of explanation. And that's the 6, so that's why you have your type correct. But even though you could see the other influences, then it was hard for you to choose them. So the rules are often social or self-present, not sexual. Because the sexual is the change work element, like doing the new thing, going against. So we move from, in our type, self-pres is holding on. Social is needing others and interfacing with society. And sexual is, hey, this needs to be changed. So they're the change element, whatever type they have. So the secondary pattern that you've addressed, where you have a different type, I do use in an advanced way, and you're onto it. And you have to look at your stacking, your instinctual stacking, and your Myers-Briggs, and then see how they would influence one another. And again, what would be canceled out and what would be amplified. So if you are an INTJ, you're less likely to voice what you're thinking, unless it's something that is, if you had a type or a Tritype that, like if you led with 5, you might voice it anyhow because it would bother you that people were inaccurate. But overall, comparatively speaking, compared to the other Myers-Briggs types, the INTJ is less likely to express what they know. They'll just either think people are idiots or be more reserved or just think it in their mind or hold back. But the explanations are 6, but we have to look at how you know you're safe with others, because the social instinct is in there. And so you have to look back and, okay, you didn't want to break the rules. You wanted your parents to see you as what? What word would you use? You said in compliance, but what kind of person would you be if you were in compliance?
Yeah, I think the most important for me, both with regards to my parents and other authorities, is to be seen as responsible.
Yeah, that's 6 and 1. You really have your tritypes right. And then how about with the peer group, which isn't an authority? I mean, you can make people authorities in your peer group, but overall, other kids, when you were a little kid trying to comply.
With the peer group, I want to be seen as a unique type of person. Not ostentatious, but to have something that is noteworthy.
And what would be noteworthy? Like, what do you remember doing as a child to be noteworthy?
Well, I tended to have a very mature, professional way of talking and speaking, especially as I got into my preteen, early teenage years. I was often seen as being very mature for my age. And in a way, I wanted to be seen that way. Not pretentious, but just very, very professional in the way I projected myself.
And why? What was the crazy idea, the reason why?
I think it was really, I guess I felt like that was a safe way to be different, you know, because I don't want to turn people off. I don't want to do something that looks crazy or that looks like I'm showing off, but I just wanted something that makes me a little different, but in an appropriate way. And I thought that was the safest persona to do that.
And was composing music and playing the piano one of those ways that you could be honored by having something that was unique?
Definitely, yes.
And at what age did you start playing the piano and people knowing about it?
I started playing when I was 9 years old. And then at the time, I was homeschooled, so I wasn't really around a lot of other kids. But then when I...
Yeah, okay. That's another factor. When people are homeschooled, it's even... Was your parent, and particularly your mother, the person doing the homeschooling? Or were there different mothers and you were part of a co-op?
Yeah, it was my parents, yeah.
Yeah, and both parents doing the homeschooling? The reason it's important is you take on more of the values of your parents, and you're less influenced by what other kids are doing. Even if you met up with other kids, like how often did you meet up with other kids when you're homeschooled? Because if you're schooled in the general population, you're exposed to at least 30 kids in a class, and let's say there's several that are your age group, then maybe it's 90 kids if there are 3 fifth grade classes or whatever. How long were you homeschooled? To what age?
I was homeschooled full-time until middle school, and then half of my classes continued to be homeschool up through high school. When I graduated. So, and during the time I was full-time homeschooled, I did get together with, groups of other homeschoolers once a week. But talking about, my parents and picking up traits of the parents when you're homeschooled,
Values, not necessarily traits, values.
Right, values. Yeah, both of my parents are very strongly self-pres. And I have wondered if is perhaps growing up in that kind of environment what's led to some confusion about my instinct, because I've wondered about that.
Well, yeah, and if you're self-pres sexual, really close, but your parents were the strong pattern, you know, where one is very strong and then the others were lower, you could seem not self-pres, comparatively speaking. But with the sexual, it's a little harder. You don't get the opportunity unless you got together with the other homeschoolers to find your someone. And the sexual subtype, wherever they are, must have their someone. Like I'm in a family where there are no other sexuals. Even in the extended family, I'm the only sexual. So I didn't ever get that true feeling of that union, fusion experience until it was with other kids. And then I'd find another sexual subtype and I go, wow, this just like we're thinking about the same things. We're talking about the same thing. We may have a different opinion. So you would have noticed how you compared to the other kids because your tri-type is very likely to compare and contrast naturally. So don't worry about the answer. Just consider that it could be self-pres sexual, really, really close. And just notice what your own defense strategy does under stress versus what your parents' defense strategies do under stress in terms of like survival. And if there's something askew with the fundamentals of life.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you. That helps a lot. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I actually have found that particular pattern when they're just neck and neck it's really hard if you have 4 in the tri-type to see that you might be leading with self-pres because we gave a lot of the sexual subtype issues to type 4. And the difference being that the intense longing is more sexual, but we put it in 4 as well. Now, how did that happen? That happened because when the Enneagram was introduced, those that learned in Berkeley and via Kathy Spieth, so Naranjo's training, and then Kathy Spieth, who was the girlfriend of Naranjo, and the Berkeley area all got both the types and the instincts, at least the instincts in a minor way, enough to know there were differences. But Naranjo gave permission to Robert Oakes, who's in his first study group in 1971, to experiment with the Enneagram at Loyola University in Chicago. So he started teaching people, but he did not teach the instincts. So there was a whole group of people that knew the Enneagram, in fact, a much larger amount that did not know the instincts. Now, why is this meaningful? Because if you had someone that was sensitive and emotional, they were put into 4. And then when 4 was described, it was talked about as being needing connection. And the word connection has to be qualified in a more specific way as to what someone means by connection. All of us want a connection to something. But what is it we have to have where we have this preoccupation and we feel anxiety or discomfort even if we don't know we have anxiety? Like I've learned for me, it's like my gut just gets viscerally tight or my shoulders. And I just think, God, why am I so tight? And then I go, oh, I was hurt by something, or I'm feeling my sexual and my 8 are feeling unsafe. But I never used the word unsafe, never used the word fear. The only time I ever used the word fear was I'd say, yeah. If someone say, well, what are you afraid of? You don't seem afraid of anything. And I'd say idiots, incompetence. But that's not really true. But my defense strategy says, oh, you can't be afraid of anything. But that doesn't mean that 8s aren't afraid. So in the case of the self-pres, there is fear, there's trepidation, there's a little bit of angst, a little bit of a moment of, and it's a full body experience. Whereas sexual, it's being out of attunement, even just an eyelash out of attunement, you think, oh, it's not the same. We're not connected in the same way anymore. And then you see the person again and you have that close, deep journey to something really meaningful. And then you say, oh, I guess we are. But then they say something that's a little off. You're not perfectly attuned. And it's like, oh, it's tracking. It's like, what do you track? So with the instincts, it's that, you know, what are you tracking on a primitive level that you're not even aware of? Whereas with the centers, the heart types know the role they have to play. Whereas the subtypes, no, they're primitive forms of the three centers. Now, how did that come to be? It's really important to understand the origin of the instincts. Naranjo was teaching Ichazo's instincts that became the centers, but it started out as instincts. He called them instincts. 8, 9, and 1 was a certain instinct. 2, 3, 4 were an instinct. 5, 6, and 7 were an instinct. But then Naranjo needed the subdivision, a variation, a way to explain those differences. So he took the same 3 instincts as a primitive version as the 3 subtypes of the type. So it's still the same. The errors came into play when people like reworded it or explained it differently. They weren't looking anymore at the raw pattern that Naranjo was using. And then they gave further descriptions of the instincts that actually weren't quite true for a lot of the instincts. It was all happened by accident. It was everybody trying to figure out what wasn't taught. And then, as I said, Ichazo felt the same thing. There were these divisions, and he just called them trifixes, but it was the same dilemma. And I just use it all because I find all of it meaningful, and that they were both onto something really that you could track and see in other people if you understood it. But it's going back to the fundamental way of being. So some types like 8s just, oh yeah, I'm sub-pres. I'm gonna be comfortable. I'm gonna do what I want when I want it. Yeah. But when you study it, the sexual way, well, oh God, I hate to admit it, but I think I'm sexual. I just don't show anybody. But actually we do. And it'll be in our talk style. So I encourage everybody to listen to the words you use, the phrases you use, and then the constant patterns of what you're talking about, and you will see your types. You will see your instincts most of all. Like, what kind of movies do you like to watch? What do you like in the vocabulary of the movies? What's the energy like in the movies? What's going on? Where's the thrills, so to speak, or the enjoyment factor? And it's really different based on the instincts. And that's a whole nother discussion, doing the lexicon of the types. So I encourage everyone to do that. Anyone want to say anything else on this area, or I'll move on to the next question? Thank you so much, Samuel. Because he's either the exception to the rule, which I'm always open to, or, and in other words, a different type of sexual with a slightly different pattern, and I need to learn it. I need to learn those nuances, or it's just slightly more self-pres. And 6s are the social point on the Enneagram, the center of the social types, social and antisocial types. So it gets complicated, especially if you're the INTJ. It gets really complicated. Okay, thank you. Stephanie, are you saying something or wanting to? I don't know what.
No.
You're lit up. On my screen, you've got the green line around you. Oh, maybe you don't. Okay, I'm not sure why. No problem. Next question, Erin. I won't put you on the spot. Oh, Stephanie, no. Will you share how for a long time you thought you were a 4? And then after you really refined your tri-type, then you revisited the instincts and you were that person that's just a hair more self-pres than sexual. Anything you could share that would be helpful to people?
About going from 4 to 6 and then going from self-pres to sexual.
Yeah.
A lot in there. I guess like because at the beginning reading the literature of 4 seemed so really like I really identified with that, and being an INFP and being an artist and a designer and like all this different stuff, but I didn't want to own, or I didn't like, I always saw the 6, but I didn't want to own it because of like the shadows and all the gross experiences I had had with other 6s with their unmanaged shadows, I guess.
You mean the fear?
But it was
the fear. You mean the fear, the expression of fear and anxiety?
Yeah, just kind of, yeah, the like unhealthy versions of 6 were just kind of hard for me to identify with, but there's a reason for that because of my shadow, obviously, but ultimately it was the fear that was running the show, which is because people still will say, well, I could still make a case for you being a 4, and I'm like, no, it's not. And
because it's in your tri-type.
Yeah.
So
yeah. But yeah, it's 100% the fear and the anxiety that are the biggest motivators underneath it.
And so
yeah.
The way I remember it is that dilemmas you were facing, the driving experience was anxiety and not envy. And what people don't realize is 6s are very envious, but fear trumps it.
Yeah.
And with 4, the envy's there because of that feeling, that fundamental sense of lack. And so you have to hate, at least momentarily, people that possess what you don't possess. And you had, of course, both on a primal level, but the anxiety and the fear was the one that was harder to manage.
Oh, yeah. And like, just, sorry, go ahead.
And that's what made it more 6 than 4.
Right. And now it's like so obvious.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just constantly there. And I remember speaking to somebody once about whether it was 4 or 6, and he just kept trying to tell me it was 4 because it was like, what are words you'd use to describe yourself? And I used 4-ish words. And he's like, but you're not talking about fear or like anxiety. And it's like, well, that's because that's a given. Like, I already know that's there. I don't need to tell you about it. I don't know.
Yeah, because you're already living with it all the time.
Yeah.
And the descriptions of 6 sounded probably so pathetic, like the gifts of 6 weren't really promoted. Yeah,
100%. And it was the stereotype of the 6 and the 693, which is not really me.
Yeah, exactly. So, thank you for qualifying that.
Yeah.
And then what was it that finally helped you see that, yes, sexual was there and prominent, but it was more the absence of social, and that the self-pres was just also a given, but was just a little bit more than the sexual?
Well, I think it was sort of just realizing that I kind of had the obsession with with the 2 of them. But it was like, I don't know, that's a little more recent. Yeah. Not that recent, but it's more, I don't know. I caught myself one time because a bunch of you were telling me it's just slightly more self-pres and sexual. And I was like, okay, well, you guys are the experts, so there's something there if I'm not quite getting it yet. And then I think one time I was obsessing about how much money I had and had to spend it on clothes and shoes and what have you. And then, which I tend to do, I get obsessed with a certain thing that I need, and then that
or
dies
want,
down. And then
or perhaps want rather than
yes, yeah, it's usually want, but feels like a need. But anyway, and I just kind of caught myself in that moment going, oh wow, yeah, it is more about my physical needs. So I don't know.
Well, the sexual would want the clothes or the shoes or the things, but the self-pres would obsess about figuring out how to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had something else I was going to say about that, but yeah, it was them both kind of coming together, but it was, I felt like I physically needed them to feel safe or at ease, I guess.
Yeah, great explanation. Thank you. People, I know some of you are on European time and that it's really hard to stay, and please feel free to leave at any time. But I can do a couple more questions. Thank you, Steph.
Yeah, no problem. And you guys, this is a gel pack. I have a headache, so that's what this weird thing is on my head. I get a lot of stares in public. Some are sympathetic, some are just a little judgmental, and so I just feel the need to tell you.
Like,
okay.
why are you wearing that?
Yeah, what is that? Why does it have writing on it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. Are you still there, Erin?
Yeah. Okay, so the next question was one that we got by email, and it is, it's asking about the mistakes that were made in the dissemination of type 2 and how that has led to many type 2s mistyping as 7s, and what the distinction would be between the two if someone's wondering if they're a 2 or a 7.
It's the need for personal relating. The 2, again, needs to be seen in your eyes. They need the mirroring. They need the relationship. They need the rapport on a more personal level. Whereas the 7s just need fun companions, and even the sexual 7 that is more identified with the twinship, it's still being in love in the moment, in love with the idea of something or the similarities with another person and making that closer connection. But then it moves on to someone else. It's more head in expression, and the 2, it's more heart based, and there's like, oh, there's a shift from being in a group or with another, and then there's something that shows a distress or a need, and the 2 just moves in because it's a chance to get that good feeling of having done something for someone else. Whereas the 7s aren't rewarded that way. The 7 is rewarded by the situation staying fun and changing and exciting and moving. And the 2 gets that good feeling from connecting, here's that word again, even if they're not sexual, with others personally, having that personal rapport. And it's more complicated because tritype comes into play and the instinctual stacking comes into play. But one's mental, the idea of something, head type, what I can do to feel valued, heart type. It's a different approach. But yeah, there's a whole lot on the differences, but I'd need a lot more time to go into that. But yes, if you catch yourself needing to flatter others or talk about what's good about others or encourage them and support them and being seen as the person that is supportive, it's 2. The 7, incredible. They'll do what I call the angel of mercy. They will do something so extraordinary for someone, but don't you ever count on it. That's a one-off. Whereas the 2, it's more about who they are. It's a daily thing. Whereas the 7, it's a surprise in the moment, but not repeated. Everything must keep moving forward. Okay. Thank you.
And Robin actually had a question that she wanted to ask you about 1 and 6.
Okay, I don't see Robin.
I'm here.
Thanks. Great.
Yeah, I've been a self-type 1 for many years now, and I took your tri-type test a couple hours ago and was very surprised to be typed as a 6. And I'm in a state of my life where I've had a lot of like medical anxiety and now with coronavirus. And I guess I'm just wondering, for me, if the anxiety and fear tends to be around like integrity and people doing the right thing and me doing the right thing. And I'm just wanting a little more clarity around that because I've mistyped as a 4 and a 7 for most of my life, then knew I was a 1. And 6 is like kind of blowing my mind. It's the last one I would have guessed. And so I'm like, my whole world is being rocked right now.
Sorry, I would want to see how you answered everything, but to have mistyped as both a 4 and a 7, or maybe not mistyped as a 4, that's the last one, right? 1. Yeah, so you already had 2 mistypings, which strongly indicates 6 to begin with. But to even qualify something and saying with the coronavirus and fear, that's putting it in now, in this time frame, which is what 6s do. They don't say, yeah, for 99% of my life, I was indifferent to that, but then this came along and it stirred up that stuff. But what instinct what was your stacking?
Sexual, self-pres, social.
So that wouldn't be congruent. Something's off. Meaning either your instincts are out of order or you are the 6. Because the 6 is the voice that's supposed to be concerned about what people are doing and not doing. And if the sexual 1 is the most, they don't even seem like 1s, they seem like 8s at first because they're opinionated, they say things, they can have a kind of an edge to what they say and correcting people.
Yeah.
But personally, they feel they must improve.
Yeah.
Improvement is mandatory. Your Myers-Briggs type?
ENFJ or INFJ, depending on the day. I'm on the
Well, even saying depending on the day is also indicating the possibility of 6. Because how does it depend on the day?
Yeah, I'm very much on the cusp of introversion, extroversion, strongly both. Yeah.
I certified in Myers-Briggs first because I didn't know the Enneagram yet. And it was advancing and coming up with different ways to look at everything, which was really meaningful. But then I found the Enneagram and it didn't matter anymore because I saw a lot of these descriptions and changes were really just the difference in the Enneagram types and their instincts and their tri-type. And that once you got that, the Myers-Briggs types were really just perfect in their definition, with the exception of people that when they tested, they're like only 1 point more introverted or 1 point more extroverted, or with any of the sensate and intuitive and the thinking and feeling and the judging and the perceiving, then it's no longer a dominant feature. So that was like the first advanced kind of perspective on Myers-Briggs, was there are a lot of X's. You might find you still do one a little bit more than the other, but it is an X. It's not enough of a factor to say that you're really one more than the other. Or it's not enough. You could still slightly be one more than the other, but it's operating all the time. Now, that was my personal experience. Other people that are experts in both systems or have moved with Myers-Briggs much further, not like when I was teaching it and certifying with it many years ago, but in a more, let's say the last 20 years. They will come to the types a little differently, and they'll find value in both and be able to explain important nuances. But otherwise, there are some people that just can't get their Myers-Briggs type. Some people can't get their instinctual stacking. There's some people who struggle with getting their tritype and the dominant type. They may get their tritype but not the dominant type. And these are all important indications of things that are incongruent, that you're either the definition of the type is not as accurate to make it clear or easy, or there weren't enough people, like Naranjo said, that, you know, 8s just don't come to SAC groups. It's very rare. So he based a lot of his information on 8s that he observed, people he felt intimidated by. As a 5, and a social 5, he felt he was easily influenced and intimidated by others. And also, the way he determined the types is he took other people's work, like Karen Horney or Freud, or I can't think of all of them that I usually can retrieve. I too have a headache, actually. I need an ice pack on my head. But there were clusters. So some of the types, like 8 and 7 and 6, had a lot of different, Eric Fromm, a lot of people. Sheldon's body types. If he could see it, he put it in the type, but it was based on another person's system. And then when he worked with people or talked to them, if they didn't go through his sand sifter, in other words, someone didn't just drop clearly into a type or subtype, because see, he saw the subtypes initially as just a minor issue. The type was much more dominant, the passion, the fixation. But then he realized with some people, they had their instinctual type could become like a mini passion and be really strong. And now that would be explained as the dominant type, someone who has very strong self-pres and sexual and social are low, or very strong sexual and self-pres and social are low. Every pattern. And so we have to work with what was known when, and to go with the more complete picture, because the Enneagram of personality really began 50 years ago. And the beginnings of Eureka began in Eureka, Chile in 1968. And it wasn't taught in a more general way until Naranjo did in his spiritual groups, which was 1971. So a lot more has been learned about the types and missing types that weren't going to come to events on self-discovery. So I know personally with my studies, I would work with the people that would fill out the questionnaire and think, great, this is meaningful. But wait a minute, what about the people that would never fill out a questionnaire, never do self-help anything? And I said, they have to be represented. Like, it was believed that INTJs, when I learned it initially, were only 2% of the population. But I was meeting them all over the world, especially in tech businesses. And I thought, well, how could it only be 2%? And there are many explanations since then that someone who primarily learned Myers-Briggs first and stayed with it much longer than perhaps I did, I just found you have to go search for them to get them to participate. I had to really kind of get people. No, you want to be represented in what people say about you and your type, you got to fill out this questionnaire. You need to give me this information. And there were some types that automatically, like every study I've done, the most common type is INTP and, INFP and INFJ, just neck and neck. And then it's always the tri-type of 459 and the sexual. So if they've typed themselves correctly, they're most inclined in person or sending back a questionnaire or doing an online test to take them. But it doesn't mean that that's giving us the full picture of what's possible if you go to the people that would not ever be involved and get a lot of them. So with every study, based on what I have, I then go out and get what I don't have to get the answers. So I'm not saying you're not a one, but you've already demonstrated patterns by mistyping twice that indicates you may just be an emotional 6 that's perfectionistic.
Mm-hmm.
And so our definition of 1 was off too, because we made being perfectionistic or OCD 1, but any type can be OCD.
Yeah.
So I would, but let me know. I really would appreciate people that considered what I said and they have adjusted their stacking or their tri-type. It was very helpful again in being able to communicate those things to other people. But if you say, look at it, I looked at it for 3 months, but I find that this is what threw me off and why I thought it was a 7. Because you got to admit, 4, 7, and 1, the only thing they share in common is being idealistic.
Well, and the growth and the disintegration and integration for the 1.
Oh, thank you for saying that. You can't go by integration, disintegration. That was an error. Naranjo was misquoted and it went around the world, but you cannot look at integration, disintegration, or stress and security. And a lot of people don't know that because Don, when he first did his levels, which are phenomenal, the levels of health and, the level of violation, all of them, I think are absolutely wonderful. But in that 1996, Naranjo said the only problem with his book is it doesn't work because you don't go to another type in your line of connection when you're healthy and another type when you're stressed or unhealthy. You go to both healthy and both unhealthy. So that may be what threw you off. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people didn't know that. Mm-hmm. The books, like Rusty said that he doesn't teach it anymore. But if you talk about someone's stress point, it has to be both types, all 3 types coming together. Mm-hmm. Your main type and your lines of connection. It isn't just one or the other. I mean, I used to teach it until I learned from Naranjo that he was misquoted. Mm-hmm. But he wasn't the type as a 5 to tell people, no, that's not true, until I asked him in that training in 1996. Like, I'm just finding that people do both positively and negatively. Am I really off? What am I not getting? He goes, oh, no, that was a misquote. You're accurate. So what you found is true. And what I liked about Naranjo, too, is that he was willing to change. Like in that, when I wrote the article, I didn't want any more misinformation, so I sent it to him first and had him approve it. So if I said anything incorrectly, he could tell me how to improve it. And the only thing he improved was one comment he made about the spiteful child, which was not even what he said, but someone else, and he put that in. But in the training, he had hypothesized that Patton was actually a sexual 4 and not an 8. And I said, really, what are you basing that on? And he said, well, he designed his own uniform. And he was, cared about how he looked. And I said, but do you know he designed the uniform because it's what made it easier to get in and out of a tank? And he said, oh no, I didn't realize that. And then being a 5, he went and researched it. And so when I sent the article to him, I had in the sexual 4, which didn't really come out till 1996 from Naranjo. He moved things around and made the sexual 4 reckless, not the self-pres 4. And he added the self-contained quality of self-pres 4. And he just said, well, my only correction is I no longer think Patton was a 4. I think he was a sexual 8. So from the time I took that course with him, which was a long course, it might have been a 7-day course. It was not the traditional 5 days, I know that. But he had already thought about it, went and checked on his own, and changed. And he was an INTP. And that's one of the best things about INTP, actually. So thank you for bringing that up. I always forget to mention that, integration, disintegration. So thank you very, very much. Okay, we're at time. Thank you so much. If you, we have 3 raised hands. Let me look at my schedule.
I also want to say something to everyone asking about the test. If you did not get your email results, check your spam folder. If you still don't see it in your spam folder, send me an email. I will look for it in the database. But it looks like there are still some people's tests that aren't showing up in the database. So I'm going to try to get to the bottom of that, but you may have to retake the test. If you retake it and then still don't get your email results, definitely let me know that, because I will pass that on to our programmer.
Yeah, thank you. I would love to know of any glitches. And you can check to see if it's actually a glitch by going to the show answers. And the only time it will be weird is when you never chose a 6 card and you were told you were probably a 6, but it was based on another pattern. But otherwise, the cards that show up and the words that show up should be what you said and the card you chose when you chose it. And I know at first for me, the first round when Aaron and I did it, testing it, I noticed, wait a minute, it's not the same as what the person chose, because if I sat with someone doing it. But that's because the glitch was it was still showing the way the cards were served to you, and that did need to be fixed. So I would appreciate anything and everything, and I'm thanking you now because there's just too many to respond to everybody, but it's been what's made me a better teacher is that people willing to give me feedback. And I don't need just good feedback. I want to know what's not working or what's frustrating. I might not be able to fix it, but you never know. In the next test, I may have the next variation if it's something that was really needed, because you're going to identify it. Okay, so I'll do I can go about 10, 15 minutes longer. So obviously you guys are probably local or the other direction, not east of California. So what's the next question, Aaron? Are you still there? Because you can go if you want.
Yeah, I actually have to go.
Okay, just do the last question. Tell me
Okay.
the last question, then you can go. And to contact Aaron with, if you didn't get your results and she can't find it, it's at info@katherinefauvre.com. And the test in general is on its own website. You can get to it via katherinefauvre.com, but it's on Enneagram Tritype Test. That's all you have to type in. That's the URL. So you can get there either way. And might want to know how you got there in case that influenced anything, any patterns. So yes, thank you. Thank you very much. So last question, Erin, and then you can check. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'll give you two that are about tri-type, and you can kind of merge them or pick. Someone asked, how do you determine the order of your tri-type? And then someone else asked, and how did you come up with the tri-type names?
I think I answered, the names of the tri-type. Oh boy, that's a wonderful question. And one of the most difficult things I had to do, because I had to get people of all three tri-types to agree on the word. Like a 4 might say, no, it needs to be this word. A 7 might say, no, it needs to be this word. An 8 might say, it needs to be this word. But the only one they could agree on is what you see. And to me, that's important because I could look at the different tri-types and name them. But how do the types name themselves? And what did it take to get them to agree was very meaningful. And then testing the names became important. Like with one tri-type, it was like, healing arts, the healer. And people would say, send me feedback. Well, I'm not a healer. And I go, oh, okay. What do you do as a profession? And they go, I'm a nurse. I'm a nuts and bolts nurse, or I'm a doctor. Or, I do Reiki work, or whatever it is. But to me, that's still a healer. That's still someone doing something for others. Hi, Mark. I'm just now seeing you. I didn't see you earlier. As to what, I would see as a healer, but they all agreed after the fact. But just that word healer just didn't sit right with them. And to me, that's important because what I want most of all is for types to see themselves even more than how we see those types. And, I also want to say that on the 8th, Ben, Jonathan, and I are doing, it's the 8th, I think. Let me double check. Yeah, we're doing a hangout. The 8th, also at 1:30. And if you want to be involved in that, you can sign up. And it will be on, who knows, but for sure we're going to include parts of parenting. We're going to do little snippets of parenting in each of the hangouts. I'm going to teach a full class coming up in the future. Oh, that's the other thing. Let me know the classes you want. There's so many things I know, I kind of forget about them. Like I did a whole body of work on how to interview and how each type should answer interview questions and overcome the difficulties of their type or tri-type or instinct. And that's really important to people that have to go on interviews. How do you make being laid back a positive thing? And in a way, you're saying the truth of who you are. So you like the job later and they like you later because you're not misrepresenting yourself. But you need the language, how you talk about your strengths. So did I forget anything, Ben? I got the timing and the day right, I hope. The May?
Yes.
Okay.
May 8th and 1:30 PDT.
Pacific, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you so very, very much. I really enjoy this. And what I appreciate most of all is your willingness to share or to consider the evolution of the Enneagram and the things that ended up being errors quite by accident. And when you understand what was intended, it shifts a little bit. Many of you that have studied the Enneagram for a long time already know that. You've come up with your own way of recognizing nuances that are important that weren't in the original books that you might have read or trainings you might have attended, because that's certainly what happened to me. I modified with each training and each, even in 2005, when I went to Ichazo's intensive and spent a year on Maui and became great friends with Ichazo's teachers that taught his 40-day training and the domains of consciousness, the 2-week training, and then workshops, where they did like 40, 50 of these or more. And they gave me the actual facts about what happened when with the Enneagram. And one fact that's important that I probably should mention is that Ichazo didn't use even fixations in that first training in Eureka. Now, I remember he had 2 Eurekas, Eureka group in Eureka, Chile, and then the Eureka training that included the Enneagram. That was the 10-month training. That was in 1970, July 1st of 1970. But one of the teachers was in Eureka, Chile, and she knows what was taught and wasn't taught. And apparently the fixations didn't come till later. And they also came as a result of the collaboration with Naranjo as a psychiatrist, giving his feedback on what he knew about people. So what Ichazo was intending, and then Naranjo explaining it from a psychological perspective. Because Naranjo wasn't just a psychiatrist, he was also a deeply spiritual man that pursued many different things. And spirituality in particular, beginning in 1970, actually, right after Easter, 1970, had a traumatic experience losing his son, and that put him into wanting to understand why, and he more seriously went on his spiritual journey. But there's a lot of things that aren't taught in the history of the Enneagram because it was unknown. So that's why my focus is to get people at the source, whether it was questions I asked Naranjo myself, or people attending these different events. And like most people don't know, subtypes weren't taught in their full way until 1996. So they thought it was complete the way Naranjo was teaching it in 1971 to 73. It was not. According out of the mouth of Naranjo, he also, that was his thing. And in the beginning, he did not want to in any way offend Ichazo, so he didn't say that was his work until just about 10 years ago. But up until 10 years ago, he didn't even reveal that. He happened to tell me only because he was looking at my work and what he'd noticed and what I found and what he thought was really true. But otherwise, I wouldn't have known that. But he's shared it in, you can find it on YouTube, a couple of the more recent YouTube interviews with Conscious TV, is that what it's called for those, anybody? Yeah. Anyhow, so I encourage you to understand how things change, because it was also believed that the Enneagram came from the Sufis. Do the Sufis dance to the Enneagram symbol? Absolutely. Did the Enneagram personality come from the Sufis? Absolutely not. But Naranjo said that it just made it seem more important, and that Ichazo did it, so he carried on with it, because then people would be more inclined to look at it having value. And that's true of anything that's new. People want to see, well, where did it come from? for many years I was on, Tritype was on Wikipedia. And then suddenly it was taken down. It was up for about 6 or 7 years, and then it was taken down. And the reason was it was already covered in Enneagram Personality, which is not actually. Tritype's not even up there. But the point being is that people didn't know that. And if you don't know something, you don't realize that someone could be accurate, but they have more information. So you always want to look at how people know what they know, where they got it, and how long they've worked with people, and what they found themselves they want to modify or teach a little differently. Because I found that even before I met Naranjo and did that training. I mean, I found it with every training I went to. I found something really like a gem from each teacher. And so that would go into my training. So that's what I encourage you to do, is find the source. Go back to the source and see if you can find someone that actually knows directly from someone what was true and what was an error that was transmitted. So I didn't know till I was in Hawaii in 2005 for a year, some of the errors in transmission. Some I knew from Naranjo, but otherwise, no, I learned new ones in, I mean, I saw all the Enneagons, the whole, he wasn't supposed to share it with me, but he shared everything about the 40-day training and the domains of consciousness and all the dichotomies, all the great stuff of Ichazo. Okay? So thank you. Let me know areas that you're interested in, because Ben, Jonathan, and I are always looking for little things you might want to know more about. And also it'll govern the classes that I give priority to. And please, anything on the test is greatly, greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. I will see you on the 8th if you're there.
Right.
Bye-bye.